Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So this was actually a pretty crazy weekend. We of course had Rage of the Abyss officially released here in the TCG, and it brought so many crazy cards into the game. It definitely shook things up, and I think the bigger thing was YCS Niagara actually taking place this weekend with Rage of the Abyss finally legal. So it was definitely really cool to see how the new set has impacted the existing format. Obviously, we have those pre-sale prices last week, and things naturally come down a little bit as the set releases, but I think we were in an interesting situation because YCS Niagara and the results, which really demonstrated how strong some of those meta-relevant cards can be, have actually caused several price spikes all over the market. So today we're primarily focusing on the aftermath of YCS Niagara, and then a couple of other things that are happening around the market as well. Let's get started. So to start things off, we're taking a look at a few cards out of Rage of the Abyss, and the first one is going to be Mul Army Foos. I think that this is the card that absolutely everyone is freaking out about. It's single-handedly, I think, a format warping card. Resolving this card is so powerful that it wasn't just seeing play in the side deck, but in a lot of main decks as well, even though it's literally useless if you're going first, since you can't even use it when you pass turn back to your opponent since you have to control no cards. The advantage you get from resolving it when you are forced to go second is just that strong. And that definitely showed at YCS Niagara. I think Ryan Yu didn't run this card in his Sky Striker deck at all, but every other list that I saw was at least citing 3 copies of this card, with many choosing to run it in the main, including Landon Oliver, who won the entire event. Now this is honestly one of the most expensive cards that we've seen come out from a core set in quite a while. We did have Fiendsmith Engraver come out at around 110 to 120, but we have Foos now up at 140 to 145 apiece on TCG Player at the moment, which is pretty ridiculous. Honestly, given how strong the card is, I don't even expect it to go down in price too much. Even with crossover breakers, where Pyra is arguably better against Ryzeal, this card will definitely still see play, so I honestly don't see it dropping much. At its lowest, in like the worst case scenario, I could see this card going as low as $120. Realistically though, I think it'll maintain its current price point, and it could actually even possibly go a little bit higher as more and more events validate just how strong the card is. The next card we have here is Deception of the Sinful Spoils. Rage of the Abyss introduced a ton of support for a ton of different archetypes, and one of the strongest themes that it introduced to the game are the Azamina cards, a really strong engine consisting of spells and extra deck monsters to supplement the Sinful Spoils cards. Deception is a card that gets the whole engine going. You tribute a monster from your hand or field to search for an Azamina card, and because Deception is a continuous spell, you get to send it to the graveyard with the effect of the Hollowed Azamina to summon something out, and then Deception's own effect allows you to send it back to the field afterwards. Really cool engine, and it really demonstrated just how strong it is with the results from YCS Niagara. Whereas the past few events were dominated by Yubel, it seems that Snake-Eye was able to take back its spot at the top of the format, with Azamina Snake-Eye and Fire King Azamina Snake-Eye taking a ton of top spots in the top 32, with Fire King Azamina Snake-Eye winning the whole event. Now that said, Deception is a card that was really high on release, but seemed to fall in price right away. It was up at $60 to $65 early on, but had fallen down to $40 to $45 and looked like it was going to drop further. However, over the weekend, we actually saw Deception get eaten up off the market, as it has climbed back up to the $55 mark. The Azamina Snake-Eye deck is definitely going to be a top tier strategy for the next several months. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens after crossover breakers, as Ryzeal and Malice are currently dominating in the OCG, but for at least the next 2 to 3 months, expect the Azamina cards to be some of the more highly sought after meta pieces. One other card to talk about from Rage of the Abyss, it is Dominus Impulse. So this card is one of the most powerful hand traps available at the moment. Honestly, if Fualos wasn't in the set, I think this would be the most expensive card. It's literally a hand trap version of like Solemn Warning, as it can negate the effects of something that attempts to special summon a monster. The drawback is that if you use this card from your hand, you can't use Earth, Wind, or Light effects for the rest of the duel. However, in decks like Rescue Ace or Azamina Snake-Eye Fire King, you really only summon something like Fire and Dark monsters, so the restrictions don't really hurt you, and you get access to this really powerful disruption for free. This card is another card that was really validated by the results from YCS Niagara, as there were a ton of players in the top cut that were main decking this card at 3. Now, because of its restrictions, I think a lot of players were really hoping that this card would go the same way as Dominus Purge, where the restrictions stopped it from being used all that much, and because of that, it was able to settle down at around $20 or so, and it did start to go down that way as Impulse hit a low of around $37. However, over the weekend, this is another card that has done nothing but go up in price, as it now sits at $50 per copy on TCG Player. I definitely expect to see this card used a ton this format, and even going into the next format after Crossover Breakers, Malice is able to play this card as well. It'll definitely be interesting to see if the Snake Eye stuff will still be around in the game by then. As long as there is a meta deck that's able to use this card, expect it to sit anywhere between $40 and $50 for the foreseeable future. The next card is Fire King High Avatar Garunix. Now, this is the old Fire King Garunix boss monster from back in the first Fire King structure deck. It has a mandatory effect to special summon itself back in the standby phase after it was destroyed, and then on summon it destroys all other monsters on both players' side of the field. This card objectively isn't that great, but it's a brick that the new Fire King deck is forced to play because of Garunix. Unfortunately, this card can be really bad to draw, since Garunix can only summon it out of the deck, not even from the hand, so if you do draw it, you might have to end up popping it with Fire King Island or something like that. Anyways, the new Fire King deck with Garunix has proven to be really strong. Personally, I'm just playing pure Fire Kings because I've only really played it like locals recently. I think I've only dropped 2 games over the last 2 weekends playing it, and one of those was to Tom at YCS Niagara. I think that in the top 32, there were a total of 16 Snake Eye Azamina decks. 9 of them were just those 2 themes, 3 were Rescue Ace, and 4 of them were the Fire King variants. And Landon Oliver, who won the event, played quite a few Fire King cards and actually did run 2 Garunix with the 1 Garunix. So yeah, while it does really suck to draw this card, it's an important combo piece because you want to summon it out of the deck so that you can use it as free Link or Xyz material. Garunix has 2 printings, both of them are from structure decks. It did get a common reprint in the most recent one, but the one holo printing is from that older structure deck. That deck's really old, so if you're looking for a near mint ultra rare copy of Garunix, there's literally only 7 copies on TCG Player that are near mint at the time I'm making this video, and the cheapest one is going to cost you $7. This one might be an easy card for players to overlook in their own collections, since it used to literally only be worth like $1, but if you do have a couple of these lying around, see if you can move one of them to someone who really wants to bling out their Fire King deck. Alright, so a card that's the opposite of fire, we have the water monster Atlanteandrons. Now, of course, Rage of the Abyss gave us a bunch of support for the Mermail Atlantean deck. The deck may not have done crazy well at YCS Niagara, but I've seen some lists that did make day 2, and they're a pretty scary strategy if you don't have Droll and Lockbird. Atlanteandrons is a perfect card for the deck. If it's sent to the graveyard as cost to activate a water monster's effect, you can search for any Sea Serpent from your deck. This isn't a once per turn effect, but it's also really useful because the Mermail deck just has so many different extenders and starters and pieces that you're able to search for. This card is naturally a 3-of in the Mermail strategy, which is also able to play Dominus Impulse as well, since they really only use water monsters. Mermails are, of course, a pretty popular deck with a lot of players. They used to be one of the scariest decks in the game. This card has 3 different printings. The alties are obviously crazy expensive. They're well over $200 a piece right now. The more surprising thing is that both of the lower rarity printings are up. The supers from the old starter deck are up at $5 to $6, which seems pretty reasonable, but Dragoons actually got a common reprint in OTS Tournament Pack 14, which really wasn't that long ago, and even that common printing is going to cost you $3 to $4 each. There have been so many times where people throw out their OTS pack commons, and I'm really certain that I have at least 50 of these lying around in my bulk somewhere, and I'm sure that a bunch of you guys do too. Definitely try to dig this card up and offload them while Rage of the Abyss is still pretty fresh. Up next, we have a card that seems to be rebounding in price recently. It's Tenpai Dragon Pyra. So the Tenpai Dragon deck is probably one of the more annoying decks to have to play against. They literally just drop Shifter and a bunch of other hand traps on you, and then OTK you the next turn without giving you the chance to do anything. The most recent ban list wasn't really very nice to them, limiting Pot of Prosperity and Sanguine Summoning, but the deck has actually proven to still be really strong still, even taking 5 of the top 32 spots at YCS Niagara. Pyra is still as strong a card as ever, searching for Sangan Kaiman or Sangan summoning from the deck, and this card, despite just being a super rare from Legacy of Destruction, was actually a really expensive piece of the deck, peaking at around $20 to $25. After the ban list, this card had fallen in price to around the $8 to $10 mark. However, over the last month or so, we've actually seen Pyra climbing back up in price, and it now sits around $13 to $15 per copy. Part of that is 10 Pydragon being surprisingly strong in the new format, but another part is also definitely Trident Dragion being reprinted in the 2024 tins and making basically the entire deck actually really affordable. Theoretically, this card won't be reprinted until the 2025 tins, but we're going to have to wait and see whether or not Tenpai Dragons are going to be able to continue keeping up with the meta moving forward. Alright, last card to talk about for today, it is Gem Knight Fusion. So I did actually initially have something else in the last slot here. I'm changing this one at the last minute because we just had Gem Knights confirmed to be one of the old dual terminal archetypes that will be getting support in Terminal Revenge 2, which is a set that's coming out in the OCG. The cards are actually really good. Gem Knights get a Mathmech Circular, which can send Gem Knight Fusion from the deck to the graveyard as cost. And of course, Gem Knight Fusion allows you to banish a Gem Knight from your graveyard to add it back to your hand, so you have much more consistent access to Fusion now, as well as Gem Knight Fusion just being like a polymerization for the theme. Now, I don't know exactly how good Gem Knights are really going to be. The cards seem really good, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's enough to keep up with the current format, because by today's standards, it's almost like the new cards just seem a little bit too fair. However, I guess there is a chance that we could see Brilliant Fusion unbanned in the near future as well, which would certainly make Gem Knights a really interesting threat. Anyways, Gem Knight Fusion has a few different printings. It has a common, shatter foil, and then super rare version that are all under $1 each. However, the DT copy has basically disappeared from the market, with the only one on TCG Player at the time I'm making this video coming in at $30, though of course we haven't actually seen any sold listings on TCG Player higher than about $3. As with every time we see crazy listings like this where people just pull all of the quantities off of the market, we should definitely be waiting a week or two for players to gradually list their copies back up and for the prices to cool down before we panic buy into any copies. And then on the flip side of that, if you do have any that you are just sitting on or you have them lying around, try to take advantage of the hype, see if anyone would actually be willing to pay an inflated price right now and go ahead and just move them. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's video. Definitely interesting to see exactly how Rage of the Abyss has affected the meta with YCS Niagara happening literally on the set's release. It's definitely going to be really cool to see how Rage of the Abyss continues to shape things, especially when we know we have like a really strong set coming out with crossover breakers coming in just a couple of months. So it'll be interesting to see how Rage of the Abyss shapes up the format until then. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.